Splatoon 3's release date is just a few months away, and we have yet to get our hands on anything other than a couple of trailers and some tweets. I want more. My throat is parched, and the only thing that can fix it is some deep, inky information and the ability to finally get my grubby hands on this game. Testfires have always been a part of the pre-release of Splatoon games. In the past, they've allowed us to get a tiny look as to what's to come. So, will Nintendo keep the tradition and plan a Testfire for Splatoon 3? These Testfires are a mini demo for the game that allow the developers to throw a bunch of players on the servers and test everything to see if it has a good chance of holding up when the game finally releases. The Testfires for Splatoon are usually a 4v4 game of Turf War. It tends to run for an hour at a time, but there are usually multiple hours scheduled throughout the course of a couple days to satisfy the different time zones of the world. And for the case of Splatoon 1, there was an additional hour added on a later date because the first Testfire had issues. Does that shock any of us? That Splatoon probably had connection problems? No, of course not. Splatoon 2 also had some Testfire hours. Thanks to the fact that you could make an account for each of the 3 regions the demos were occurring in, many of us woke up or stayed up at stupid hours of the night just to get another taste of the game we were all waiting for. Splatoon 1's Testfire occurred just a month before release. The demo worked as a last-second stress test to make sure everything was good before the game came out. Splatoon 2's Testfire seemed to have a different task. Sure, they wanted to test the online capabilities for the new Nintendo Switch Online servers, but the demo ran 4 months before Splatoon's release, which was shortly after we all got our hands on the Switch for the very first time. The developers were definitely trying to capitalize on all of us Day 1 Switch players. Create some hype for the sequel to a game that almost no one played the original of because the crazy amount of success of the Wii U. We've seen Nintendo do online tests for more games than just Splatoon. You guys remember ARMS? Yeah, I forgot too. It was called the Global Test Punch. Similar to Splatoon, there were a few days with different playtest hours available for us to experience, which was also scheduled just under a month before the game released. We even recently got a test for Nintendo Switch Sports, which was about 2 months before that released. And thank God it was. I don't have footage of the issues, but oh my god, did it need some work still. At one point during bowling, somebody literally spawned on top of me and could not bowl because I was already bowling. And then the rest of us had to wait while he sat there with his bowling ball in his hand waiting for the game to just time him out. There are legitimate reasons for these playtests to exist. From mechanics testing to server testing to creating hype for the game, they do their thing. It only makes sense for Splatoon 3 to have one, right? Sure, we've already had games that can connect to the internet on the Switch. Theoretically, the servers are being tested out every day, especially with something as internet heavy as Splatoon 2 that needs to communicate with other consoles in real time to keep the games fair and balanced. So why would Splatoon 3 need a playtest? Last year, Nintendo started the process of switching over from the online service using 20-year-old tech to something more modern. According to Oatmeal Dome, there is an unused feature in Splatoon 2 that checks to see if the system is running Windows 98. 2022 servers out here checking to see if our Oregon Trail characters are dying from dysentery and how many times the abominable snowman's bit our heads off in Ski Free. Oatmeal Dome continues to say that we likely wouldn't see changes anytime soon, and Nintendo's goal was to make the switch over to the new servers without any of us noticing a difference. I do wonder if a year is considered to be sufficient enough time to test things and completely throw Splatoon 3 onto the more modern tech. This would mean a Testfire to make sure everything's working correctly, right? That not a good enough reason to convince you of a Testfire? Fine. How about the Splatoon 2 strategy of creating hype? Splatoon 2 sold 13.3 million copies since its release. Pretty good number, especially for one of Nintendo's newer IPs. But a couple of big things have happened since: the pandemic and Animal Crossing New Horizons. Everyone and their mother bought a Switch to waste time with the perfect COVID game. Stores were left with the impossible task of keeping their shelves stocked during a horrible season of supply chain issues. If you weren't following stock inventory notification sites, you didn't get a Switch. It was a war out there. But somehow Nintendo still sold 28.8 million Switches in 2020 alone. 28.8 million. That's just over double the amount of copies of Splatoon 2 that exist out in the world. Even Ring Fit Adventure sold more copies than Splatoon 2. I mean, no shade to Ring Fit, it's a fun game, but one would think a multiplayer shooter would sell more copies than a game where a ring yells at you to do thousands of squats while fighting the ab dragon to save the world. Like, come on. Sounds like a lot of extra people who are looking for something else to play now that New Horizons is all done with updates. I can't imagine there are too many of those 28.8 million people that purchased a then 3-year-old game. This article shows that in May of 2020, Splatoon 2 had just hit the 10 million sold mark, which means 3 million people decided to give Splatoon a chance from 2020 to today. But what about those other 25.8 million people that purchased a Switch in that time? They deserve to get a Testfire shoved in their face. Nintendo would be crazy not to capitalize on this huge new audience. Sure, maybe Splatoon isn't the game for everyone, but maybe they need to get a taste of the satisfying 4v4 painting shooter for the delicious price of $0 to decide. Well, probably Nintendo Switch Online, so not $0. But maybe they'll do a free weekend of Nintendo Switch Online. I don't know. This is why I am 99.9% positive we will see a Splatoon 3 Testfire. Nintendo, please don't make me eat my words, please. Now the question is, when? If we're following the Splatoon 1 schedule, a demo should appear sometime in August. But if we follow the Splatoon 2 schedule, we could see something as early as now. We are 3 months out from Splatoon 3's release date. We could get information any day now. And with Splatoon 3 news being pumped out constantly, I have the feeling we're gonna wake up one Monday morning to a nice surprise. I really want to get my hands on the game. I want to try a couple of these new specials out, see how the game has changed, see the new features, maybe performance. Most importantly, get more people excited about this frankly underappreciated game. While Splatoon falls under the shooter genre, it's really a game of its own. No game out there compares. Except for Crayola Scoot. Crayon Company saw the success of the Splatoon genre and really tried to capitalize on it. Good on you, Crayola. Good on you.